All right, it's time now for Focus. And a day before Burma's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi is due to give a public address on the Rakhine crisis, we have a report on the perilous journey of Rohingya refugees. Some 400,000 people have sought refuge in Bangladesh since the start of Burma's latest military crackdown 3 weeks ago. The army denies targeting civilians, but the UN says its treatment of Rohingya Muslims amounts to ethnic cleansing. Colleagues of ours from France too followed some of the people crossing the Burma-Bangladesh border.
This river marks a border. 300 meters away, the opposite bank is Burma. Soon after taking to the water, we come across a boat.
What's going on?
They are burning our homes.
Here, on the Bangladeshi side, these men are waiting for family members and friends to cross the river. When the border guards aren't in their area, they send a signal.
Come, the pass is clear. Come this way.
Around a dozen boats appear in the distance. Whole families are aboard, including the elderly and young babies. Their faces are etched with stress. They appear exhausted, but they're safe.
Before we crossed the river, they shot at us. They've burnt everything.
Was the journey difficult?
Yes, they kill people on the road, people walking. We ran and hid.
These refugees are Rohingya, Muslims who come from the northwest of Burma. According to the UN, they're among the most persecuted people in the world. These images show the villages they came from, filmed by the Rohingya themselves, as journalists aren't allowed in their area. The Burmese army has burnt thousands of their houses and opened fire on the civilians that live there.
Bangladesh or Pakistan.
The military say the operations are aimed at fighting ARSA, a group of rebel Rohingya that's attacked police posts. Many Rohingya are fleeing by whatever means possible.
The Rohingya are trying to cross this natural border whichever way they can. The journey can be extremely dangerous. We've heard gunfire from the Burmese military on the other bank. In the last 10 days, more than 90 corpses have been found in the river. It's not over when they reach the other side. There's a long walk ahead. And the nearest Bangladeshi village is hours away.
It's a grueling journey. Heavy rain makes the going tough. The refugees carry what they can on their backs. Those who can't walk, like this elderly woman, are carried by their families.
We were very afraid. We hope we'll be safe now.
After 2 hours, they reach the first Bangladeshi village. There's no help waiting for them. 300,000 Rohingya have arrived here in the last 2 weeks. There's no food and no clean water. They find shelter where they can at the side of the road. This family arrived yesterday. The journey took 7 days on foot. They had to carry one of their sons on their shoulders after he was shot in the leg by the Burmese army.
We saw a lot of people die. We could only save him. They were dying one after another.
Burma's population is 90% Buddhist. As Muslims, the Rohingya say they're seen as their enemy.
It's the Buddhist monks. They kill people. One takes you, the other slits your throat. They don't want us in their country. They say we don't belong here. They want to kill us. They want to kill us all.
In the makeshift camp, life continues. This baby boy was born a few days ago. His parents haven't had time to name him. Little by little, new villages are being built, constructed from bamboo and tarpaulin, extending to the horizon. Some Bangladeshis are keen to offer help, giving out clean clothes. Many of the children have nothing to wear.
Please put this T-shirt, and he look very beautiful.
A little comfort for people who've suffered severe trauma. But there's thousands of Rohingya left behind in Burma. Many have hidden in forests, without food or clean water, in a zone blocked by the army, cut off to the outside world.
For more on this, I'm now joined by David Cameroux from Paris's Sciences Po University. He's a specialist on Southeast Asia. Hello, thank you very much indeed for coming in today. Now, what are you hearing about what's happening on the ground? Do you think the UN is right in talking of ethnic cleansing?
Yes, I think they are right. About two-thirds of the people leaving are women. And about half of them are minors. So that gives you an idea of the people that are being pushed out.
What can we expect, do you think, from Aung San Suu Kyi's speech tomorrow? She's going to be addressing the nation. So far, she's been widely criticised for her silence. All she said is that there's an iceberg of misinformation, and she said that it's benefiting the terrorists. What do you think she'll say tomorrow?
Well, it depends which Aung San Suu Kyi is going to speak. Is it going to be the democratic icon that we have supported in the West, or is it going to be what in Burma is called the Minlung, that is the virtuous queen who has come to restore the Buddhist order and to restore the order of the Dharma, the Buddhist order, and therefore cannot come out and say in support of the Rohingya, if that's the Aung San Suu Kyi who's going to speak tomorrow or later today.
And what about the influence of the military? Because some have been saying her hands are tied and there's really only so much she can say because the civilian government really operates separately from the military.
Yes, the military has 25% of the seats in the parliament. They control the Ministry of Defence, the Interior, and the Ministry responsible for all the frontier areas. So basically the military is doing what it wants to do in Rakhine State, and Aung San Suu Kyi and the civilian government really has no role to play in that. I mean, Myanmar, beyond Burma, is experiencing a democratic transition, but it's one under surveillance by the military itself, and she can only go so far. Her hands are really quite tied.
It's not the first time there's been a military crackdown in Rakhine State. How does this particular crisis compare to previous ones?
Well, it's different insofar as the magnitude is much greater. There are already 200,000 or so refugees in Bangladesh going back decades. It has been a perpetual movement, a strategy of repression. But after the 25th of August, this really became very intense. Precisely the day after Aung San Suu Kyi had published a report by Kofi Annan, which actually recommended giving citizenship rights eventually to the Rohingya. So one can perceive this as the army taking the pretext of the attack by this defense group, this Rohingya militia, to really crack down, to pursue perhaps to an nth degree the policy which has pursued since the 1940s, in basically putting such pressure on repression on the people, ethnic cleansing, to force them to leave.
Giving them more rights, giving them a legal status is something that the UN Gensec has called for, Antonio Guterres. Do you think that's likely to happen anytime soon?
I don't think it's likely to happen, but it's the absolute prerequisite, because they're without a state. They don't have access to health care, they don't have access to education. They had their citizenship taken from them in 1982. And unless they're acknowledged as one of the national races, to use the term in Myanmar, unless they're acknowledged as being citizens or peoples of Myanmar, of Burma, then there's no way they can move forward.
So what's it going to take? We've got Human Rights Watch today saying there should be sanctions, there should be an arms embargo.
I think the only kind of pressure that's going to count is from the neighbouring countries, from Indonesia and Malaysia, majority Muslim countries, where it's now become a political issue within those countries itself. So it's that sort of neighbourly pressure that may bring about some kind of change. But I think the best we can hope for is access to humanitarian assistance within Rakhine State. But that will not solve the fundamental problems, which goes back really till the Second World War, that these people are considered not as being Burmese.
You mentioned before Bangladesh took in many Rohingya Muslims even before this crisis, and recently it's been dealing with flooding, and now it's got 400,000 people that have come in, and it's setting up tents and accommodation, temporary shelter for them. Considering all of that, what do you make of Bangladesh's reaction?
I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, this is one of the world's poorest countries with this, within the limits of their resources, these acts of great generosity and compassion, and so they're trying to do the best they can. They are open to foreign assistance, but it's really has to be the Burmese government, the government of Myanmar, and the military that has to change the way they deal with these people and accept the fact that they are in fact Burmese.
All right, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis, David Kemmeroux. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I'll be back at the top of the hour.